But, can we show that painting that he did in 1965? It's really a fascinating painting. Oh, yeah. Oh, I have it, Maria. I emailed it to you, Maria, and then he can see it too. We're gonna share it on Maria has it.
I have a photo of it. Maybe I could send it
Uh, I have
later.
one. It's from the Art Institute catalog. I went into the SFAI archives, and they have
Yeah.
now downloaded every catalog, and you can go through and capture all
Okay.
those photos. And so I
Well,
found yours
this
in
is
1965.
that was when I was a BFA.
Yeah. And then you got an MFA from SFAI?
Well, are we now
Yeah,
on?
we can start now.
Okay. Well, um, I went to the Art Institute from 1962 to 1967. Prior to that, I went 1 year to Georgetown University,
Oh,
where I was
right.
going to be a diplomat or a spy or something. And I decided it's not right for me. And so I came to the Art Institute, and I really didn't know much about art. I mean, I had been drawing and painting all my life, but I had not been to, I'm from Rock Springs, Wyoming. And so I hadn't been to museums or anything until I got to Washington, D.C. And finally went and saw some art galleries and museums. So when I went to the Art Institute, I just happened to look at the catalog and loved the way the catalog looked and ended up there. It could have been the Academy of Art or another place. I ended up at the Art Institute, thank God, but because I had no idea of what I was getting in for, nor did I know any of the history at that time of the Art Institute. Now, when I taught at Santa after I graduated from MFA in painting, and by the way, I was even told I wanted to switch to sculpture while I was in the MFA program. And they told me, you can't, you've got to stay a painter to graduate. You started here. And so I finished up and then never went back to painting. And then I taught at Santa Clara University for 7 years. And because I wouldn't move down there, I didn't get tenure, along with Irv Tepper and a few other people, artists who we live in the city but drive down. And in 1978, Howard Freed hired me. Now be sure to talk to Howard,
Yeah.
because I don't know how much of this story is true, but Steve Goldstein was the president at the time. And the rumor goes that he sold the Muybridge print that the library had and bought a video deck and camera for what we call performance video. It was not even real. It was like an offshoot of independent study, I guess, for a while, but we called it performance video. And we started in Studio 9 only. That was the only room we had. And Studio 10 at that time was still part of ceramics, where you could do clay sculpture. That's not the wheel, but actual clay sculpture. So we didn't get 10 for quite a few years. But I was on quite a few NEA panels. I received some NEA grants, and then they invited me to come back and be a panelist. And at that time, they were having the same problem where people were doing things outside of the typical painting, sculpture, printmaking categories. So they decided to call a new one called New Genres. We changed our name to New Genres when the NEA did.
Oh.
And 1 year, I can't remember the year, but 1/4 of the New Genres recipients in the United States came from SFAI. And that was one of the years that Karen Finley was in it. And then the big controversy, and Jesse Helms came and wanted to get rid of the NEA, and everything else that went along with that story. And you could call her and talk about that, I'm sure, because
She's going to talk to us. Yeah.
anyway, now my classes that I taught were, well, Howard and I were the only faculty at the time. Later on, when Howard gave up the chair, I became chair and hired Sharon Grace and Doug Hall. And one thing, let me just explain a little bit the way I taught. I insisted that students be on time. Classes, instead of 9 to noon, I started at 10. We'd go sometimes, depending on the day. If I had Friday, I'd have a class all day, morning and afternoon. But if it was Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday, it would be a morning class, let's say, but we'd start at 10 and go to 1 rather than 9. But you had to be on time as a student. And if you keep missing, you couldn't stay in the class. And the reason was I expected 3 students a day to show work. And some of them would spend the whole night up preparing a piece in Studio 10, Studio 9, I mean. And I expected the whole class to be there. Now, the other thing I wouldn't allow is that the artist who presents the work to talk. They could say the title of the work and that was it. They had to listen to each of us in the room give our reading of or viewing of the piece. And we couldn't ask questions of the artist, but we could make comments. And at the end of all of this, then the artist could talk and answer questions. And the reason I did this is I wanted to talk about the art, not about what the artist said. Like if they said, "Oh, this is a painting of my mother," and I wanted to make sure that blah blah blah. If we didn't bring that up, that's what the artist heard. So we ended up talking only about the art and not what the artist talks about. And and I also encouraged or tried to have mixed classes, that is, photo people, painters, sculptors, new genre people, etc. So a video person would be talking about a painting someone brought in or a sculpture. Although it was new genre, a lot of students would bring in work that they were doing more in their major, and we'd talk about it. It was almost just like a mixed or independent study program at that time. And it was much more interesting to hear a painter talk about a video artist than us to say, well, you could have edited this or improved this shot or whatever. Instead, they could talk about the content and as it relates to art, painting, sculpture, all of these things. We have some, they're not unwritten rules, but there are certain guidelines that we go by, whether it can make a piece work. So after the other thing is beginning courses, I didn't expect students, I didn't show them how to use the cameras, the video cameras or anything. Instead, we had staff who would do that. The last person that I worked with was Kurt Lundblad, but many people came before him. And they would teach the students on a one-to-one basis how to use the video camera, how to edit, how to do whatever if they wanted to do that. So we had checkout for video cameras and portable decks once we eventually got those kind of things.
Can we just add that the video was extremely expensive? It was 3/4 inch at the time.
Yes.
And to use it, it would cost like $10,000 a day. So this was very valuable equipment that students can use whenever they wanted. Is that correct?
Yeah, but the non-portable equipment was only used in the studio with a camera set up on a tripod. That was a requirement. They couldn't take it home. But once we got porta-packs with it, I think it was by then almost half-inch reel-to-reel when those came along. And once we got porta-packs, they could check those out. Now, the other thing I would do with a beginning class is not expect, since I wasn't teaching them how to shoot, I would give them a project like, I would like you to travel at least 3 miles away from San Francisco and to do a piece. It doesn't have to be video, it could be anything, but to make a piece, photograph it, bring it back or whatever. And one student even, on one occasion, took his Christmas money's airport ticket and flew to Switzerland, did a piece, and then came back. And what he did was went with full head of hair, came back with a shaved head, and had it shaved by a friend. He had heard this expression by Tom Marioni, drinking beer with friends is the highest form of art. So he met a friend in Switzerland. They had a beer. They shaved his head, got back on the plane, and flew back to show his piece. So what it did is it was a great piece, but also the rest of the class saw how open art could be if they just wanted to loosen up a little bit. And another one of the pieces I required was, and another occasion, was to bring in a block of ice and introduce yourself. Break the ice and introduce yourself any way you wanted. And that turned out very well. I think I told you this story already, Annie, right?
I've read it, but I don't mind hearing it again because others haven't heard. Yeah.
Well, many of the students would chip at it and say, well, I was born in Wisconsin, and chip a little more and try to make a head out of it or whatever. But this one student, Arturo Galster, did this piece where he brought in 2 blocks of 25-pound blocks, 2 25-pound blocks of ice. And he had a chair on one side of the room and a chair on the other corner of the room. He put 1 block on one chair and another block on the other chair, and an olive on one of the blocks of ice. Then he went to the center of the room and he dropped his pants and he shuffled over to the block, towards the block with the olive, and he jumped on it. And we're all thinking, oh my God, he's freezing his ass. And then he jumped off and he scooted about across the room and jumped on the other block, and there was the olive. And that was an incredible piece. Well, he was always making those kind of pieces. Unfortunately, he was the one that was killed outside the Castro Theater some years later. I can't remember how. He might have been shot or pushed over and died, but he was killed. They were showing, I think, gay films at the theater that time, and somebody killed him right outside the Castro. Yeah,
I'll have to look that up.
Yeah, Arturo
What happened to
Galster.
him?
Yeah,
I remember him. Yeah.
and then one other piece he did that was quite interesting but a little dangerous. He brought in what looked like a welding tank and put it up in the room, and then started telling the story of the Eeks, the story of how if you're a grandmother with no teeth, you're kicked out of the tent, you're not able to help the family, you can't chew your food, you're no good. And people in the room were really, not crying, but feeling very sorry. But he turned the tank on, and it was laughing gas. And soon we're all on the floor laughing like crazy. The worse the story gets, the more we start laughing. But I had to stop that kind of thing because that could be dangerous, where you bring in something like that, somebody who could be allergic or whatever, or inhale too much. So, but Arturo was always doing these incredible pieces that stood out.
It's fascinating. The interpretations you got from your assignments were so radically different.
Yeah, and then I also did some red arches outside on the concrete walls of the Art Institute, and there's maybe still there. One was above the gallery, the Atomic, the
Atomic
upper,
Bean. Yeah.
up, one was up there on the wall facing the library, near the library windows, and the other two were down below on the auditorium wall. One of them was on the auditorium wall, and I offered A+ or honors to anyone who could climb any of them. And I had checkout climbing shoes. You could go to the checkout like you video camera. You could check out climbing shoes. This is a different arch. This is the one I built in the gallery. Yeah, that a friend of mine from Yosemite was able to climb, and the only one that's ever been able to climb it, a professional rock climber from Yosemite, by doing it the correct way. There are a number of ways to go up it, but to do it the way I designed it. But the anyway, Don Freiling,
Oh, right, Dawn.
who eventually got a Sika award, did climb the arch.
She did it. Wow.
And I offered her, the highest grade, and she said, "No, I like coming to class. I'll take the grade, but I'm still going to come to class." And then Tony and I would have competitions, Olympics. And I remember, the one I remember most is when one of his students gave everybody high heels, and they had to come down Lombard Street above the Art Institute. And whoever won, well, obviously Tony's class beat us there. Somehow he had one person that could really race down that hill. But we also went to bowling alley. We did the hockey, and just the thing is, there used to be a hockey rink out on the avenues, way out there somewhere, and I went out before and saw this one guy skating around, just incredible skater, and I went up to him. He was about our student's age, and I said to him, "You want to come over to the Art Institute and skate with my team, perhaps, and hang around Studio 9, and I can pay you with a beer or case of beer." And he said he'd love to. And he worked. He one time went out for the Minnesota, I think it was the Minnesota Vikings or whatever.
Yeah.
And before he moved to California. So single-handedly, we won the game. And Tony had all of the Icelandic, Scandinavians, like
Norwegians,
Norwegians. He had all those people, but not one of them. And this woman on the left side of the photograph was my goalie, and she never had to stop one puck. This guy I brought from the avenues single-handedly won the game for us, and you can see there are quite a few people.
I see you. You're on the bottom row.
And right next to Ivar here.
Yeah, you're near. Kevin Everson is kneeling, and Toshi is sitting in front of you.
Yes.
Ivar's, and then Kurt Lumblad, who's from Minnesota, who's another ice skater.
Yeah.
That was quite a crew.
3D dumb feedback here, and a lot of Icelandic. We used to have a lot of Icelandic students. I think 3 or 4 one year were from Iceland at the Art Institute.
Well, in the front, people might miss it, but there's Larry Andrews, who's sitting in the front. He's a black student.
Yes.
And among all the white shirts.
And his wife is back here. They weren't married yet, but you see the woman
in the gold, the shiny dress?
Behind, in the very back with the blonde hair.
Oh, yeah, the blonde hair. Yeah. That's Argonar.
Yeah.
From Iceland.
Yeah. Now, the other thing I used to do, an after class we'd often go down to the International Bar at the bottom on Columbus
La
and
Roca?
play pool.
Yeah.
And play pool.
Yeah.
And when the Art Institute moved to 3rd Street, we go to the Dog Patch Cafe after class and play pool. And that was always interesting because a lot of the students, we just hang around for another hour and drink a beer and play pool. And the other thing that I did, I'm married to Isabel Sorrell, and she's she speaks Spanish, and so we took intensive classes to Mexico, like during the summer or whenever there were these 2-week intensives. We went one time to San Miguel de Allende, and another time we went to Oaxaca, and with 12 students approximately each time. And while we were in Oaxaca, we met Ron Cooper, the LA artist Ron Cooper, the minimalist, who then moved to Oaxaca, a town outside of Oaxaca, and started making mezcal. And he called it Del Gay. And the president of Mexico thought it was the best mezcal in Mexico and served it in Mexican dinners. And I also had him come up as a guest to our class, but since we weren't allowed to drink on campus, we had to go to an artist studio in the Mission to be able to enjoy his maguey. Now, that was about the same time, this is an unfortunate time, when Anne Hatch offered us what was on 14th Street, her Cap Street's place project. She
The
offered
house.
the house, not the Cap Street, not the one where David Ireland is, and not 65 Cap Street. This was on 14th Street. It used to be an automotive shop. And she gave a show to Bill Viola, and his wife gave birth there during the show. Anyway,
I think James Lee Byers had a show there. You did. You had the bells that you rang
that
there?
was at 65 Cap.
Oh, okay.
I had the show 65 Cap, but didn't live it. And Kathy Brew was the
director
there. But Anne offered us the building for $1, and I don't remember who the president was, but he turned it away. He said, no, there are too many muggings around that area for our students to be around.
Oh.
And what we ended up finding out, that same semester, I asked students to do their first piece in their apartment. And I would say a third of the class lived within about 4 blocks of that area, 14th and Mission and Vallejo, Valencia, York, a lot of students live in that area. It was unfortunate because we could have had that building for $1 at the time.
Yeah.
Anyway, the person that owns it now, Clive McCarthy, came to the Art Institute, came to Postback, and got into the graduate program after making a fortune in Silicon Valley. He was 58 when he came to the Art Institute. And he was in my class, and still to this day, he makes paintings by code. They're paintings, and he's at 14th Street, and his paintings are all done by code. He writes the code for a blue brushstroke or a red line. Yes, exactly. Now, we also took students. I had a cabin in the mountains in the Sierras, and we take students up there for also a 2-week intensive. And I'd show them around. We'd be a talk would be given to us by a naturalist who explained the flora and fauna of the area. It took them a rock climbing course, and then they could come up with a piece that they wanted. There were the empty railroad tunnels that the Union Pacific abandoned. There were some people did pieces in just the forest or whatever. But for 2 weeks, this was an intensive, and we charged them $125 just to cover their food, when we heard that another ex-Art Institute student was doing the same thing in New York and charging something like $500 to $1,000 just to be in the course on top of the Art Institute's tuition. So that was, but Isabel and I put them up in our cabin for 2 weeks, fed them, and everything went very well with that. Now, you asked me some of the guests that we had. Each of us were allowed, whoever was the chair would invite the guests, but the faculties could each ask or recommend someone. And while I was chair or recommending to Howard, we brought out Gerhard Johann Lischka, who is a philosopher and art critic and writer in Bern, Switzerland, who taught at the FNS school. And we actually traded. I taught there for a couple of weeks, and he came here and taught for a couple of weeks.
Wow.
And he stayed in the apartment below, at the bottom of the school. And he thought that was pretty horrible. He came twice.
They call it the bunker. So,
well, anyway, Paula Anglem let him stay in her apartment the second time he came. Nice, yeah. Because I also invited Maria Abramovich to come.
Oh, right.
And Mary Lucier to each do.
Oh, she was great.
An intensive, and they each did half of an intensive. And Marina Abramovich asked them to come an hour earlier in the morning, like 8 o'clock, because she wanted them to do some exercises and stretching before the class. Whereas Mary Lucier wanted to come an hour later. She didn't want him to come until 11 because she didn't like to get up that early. So they were two completely opposite.
Different.
Completely opposite, but that was an interesting group. And then so invited Bill Volman, William T. Volman, who won the National Book Award for this book, Europe Central. He lives in Sacramento, and he was knighted in Norway for writing the history of Norway with this book, The Ice Shirt.
The Ice Shirt.
And he wrote the history of Norway, and he won for two things, fiction and nonfiction for this book. He won for nonfiction because he was so accurate. They knighted him in Norway, but he won for nonfiction because what Olga says to Ivar in bed, he makes up. Or what Gunvald says to her husband, Gottfried. All of that is made up. But he won for fiction and nonfiction with this.
That's fantastic.
Class, I was hoping he's the one that would go to war zones and then write about them. He went to Afghanistan. He went to Herzegovina when Yugoslavia was breaking up, Bosnia. He was in a Jeep where it blew up and the driver was killed, but he lived. He's now writing a book on Ukraine. And so I'm we're anxious to see that book when it comes out. And I remember
Yeah.
when he came to the class, I was hoping he would talk about some of these ventures he had. Instead, he read poetry that he had written. And the students were kind of nodding off. And he pulled out a starter pistol and he fired it 3 times. They woke up and they listened from then on. But we can't have that kind of thing anymore, Bill. But he was that kind of guy.
He's a character.
Oh, incredible.
These people are all like models on how to live an interesting life for students. They sort of see there's another way to live, right?
Now, I can just mention some of the students that went to New Genre who you would think were like Toba and Rachel Kaduri.
Yeah.
And Toba is known for her drawings and painting, and Rachel for her sculpture, but they would come to New Genre classes and present what they were doing. And Julien Berthier got some kind of a grant from France to come over, and he did some very interesting pieces and literally got me a gallery in Paris when I was looking for a Paris gallery. And then there were others like, of course, Jennifer Locke, Karen Finley, Deborah Ingalls, Gay Outlaw, who lives out in the avenues in San Francisco. She came to class. So that's about it.
You had quite a few. Yeah. There was you also had Mark Pauline come and blow something up on the roof.
Pardon?
You also had Mark Pauline as a guest who blew up some sculpture on the roof. Do you remember that?
That might have been Tony.
Oh, maybe Tony. Yeah. And there's always something going on back there.
Yeah. Yes.
And even though you were sort of ghettoized in the back, and it's kind of shocking that you got stuck there, that it didn't give you a painting studio or move you to another room, more space. But maybe in some ways, what you did with those 2 small rooms was pretty remarkable, what was made there.
We did do this, though. On Fridays, often there weren't classes in some of the painting studios or drawing at the top of outside the courtyard.
Yeah.
And we would use those rooms sometimes because they were empty. A student would come in and set up a piece in one of these rooms because the school was pretty much empty on Fridays with studio courses. It seemed like they were mostly the academic courses, I guess, that day. But I had installation courses on Friday.
Oh,
the reason I did was because installation takes longer, therefore we could spend more time, a whole day, looking at 3 or 4 or 5 students only. And that's why I made sure they were on time. I remember one time locking the door and not allowing a student in, and he was furious and he complained. I gave him one more chance. He did it one more time, and the president, Fred Martin, said, "Sorry, you're out." If he said you have to be on time, but some faculty weren't like that. I mean, they didn't care whether you came in a little late, but I did.
Yeah, there were some strange times, like in Bob Hudson's class, somebody put up drawings that looked so old, and it was kind of a shock. He said, "It's apparent to everybody that you haven't done this work in like 5 years, and why are you here? Because if you don't want to make art, why are you wasting your money and wasting our time putting something up that you don't care about?" That was really hard to hear. It's really kind of heartbreaking for the guy. It was kind of saying you need to leave.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And the Art Institute was like that. It's like, if you're not serious, I mean, we'll take your money, but you should find a better route. It was harsh. It was harsh. Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of it I mean, definitely self-taught. I got out of painting. I had Richard Devencorn, Bischoff, Lobdell, Joan Brown. I
Wow.
had the whole group. And at the most, my paintings were disciple. I was a good disciple. But I used to paint as a 6-year-old, 7-year-old, and I'd win ribbons at the Sweetwater County Fair in Wyoming for my
That's good.
horses and mountain landscapes. So I didn't really know what art was when I got to the Art Institute. And I remember walking into Joan Brown's class, and I had a little wooden box with about 50 little tubes of paint the size of my little finger, and a brush with 50 hairs maybe, and a cardboard canvas, one of those small ones. And I walked in, I couldn't believe the people with 6-foot canvases and Ron Titus with the whole wall.
Yeah.
And she said, I would like you to go down to Bay City and I want you to buy paint, and I don't want anything smaller than a quart can and a
Yeah.
brush 3 inches wide. So I fell into that and became one of their disciples. But because I always thought painting is, if you could make it look like it is, like a photo, the closer it is, the better artist you are. When I was a kid, that's what Wyoming used to think.
Well, that was the definition to most Americans, right?
Abstract art was never anything around, and definitely not Bay Area abstraction. But and in fact, you were the one that mentioned we're living on our laurels. The catalogs should not have been showing the Bay Area abstract expressionism only, but the work it was going on at the time.
But I always liked your department the way it had a camaraderie, and it makes me kind of think back to your relationship to Tom Marioni and going to have beer at the Museum of Conceptual Art. That was sort of a practice that you guys did.
Well, Tom was a big influence because when he worked at the Richmond Art Center as the curator, and he gave me my first show. And I locked the door with 10,000 pounds of ice, the main door of the museum. It was July, and you had to go through a side entrance. And at the opening, I didn't, the truck with the ice showed up. We blocked the doors, and I had my other work inside. And the audience could look at the ice and walk in the side door. But the fire department showed up and said, you have to have 2 means of egress. And they took their axes and chopped my ice to pieces in a few minutes. And I thought it would be a glacier and just melt down the sidewalk towards the street. In the summer, it would take maybe a week. But nope, it was gone in about 2 hours. They just chopped it to pieces. And I didn't have a video camera at the time, or a Super 8. That's what we used. Super 8 cameras.
Yeah, that's right. So,
video.
it's also when you talk about doing painting at the Art Institute, you were painting. There wasn't the large new building there until '68. So you were painting there, and there was that big meadow out in the back, right? There was no ramp to sculpture.
No.
There was no. All of that was.
I was also was living in graduate school. I was living in Napa, in Atlas Peak Road in the country, and I was working at a winery, and going in for the one class we had a week for the graduate seminar, and painting as much as I could, but trying to switch to sculpture.
Right.
Didn't seem to work. I was very influenced by Peter Gutkin, who was in the program, and doing resin and fiberglass pieces. And my first sculptures were resin and fiberglass. And at one time, I did know Rene DeRosa, and I was working for him in the vineyards. And one day he asked me, I was grafting vines, the rootstock of a French wine onto the the stalk of an American fruit because they're more hardy. And he asked me if I'd build a floating piece for his lake, which I did. And it was made of resins and fiberglass and welded steel and other things. And I did one more piece, a 30-foot flagpole that bent in halfway up in the wind. There was no flag on top. It just bent over back and forth in the wind in the afternoon. But I was doing this with a mask and rubber gloves and eye goggles and grinders. Now, this is so stupid. I'm on 500 beautiful acres and his cattle are around. I asked him if I could make one more piece, and he said, okay. I made a piece with a salt that the cattle lick, salt blocks, red, yellow, and white, iodine, sulfur, and iron, the three colors of salt blocks, drilled a hole through them, put them on a pole, and the cows came and licked them away. And that was the last piece of, that was my first real piece of conceptual art. And I decided from then on to work with site and situation and with materials often indigenous to the site. And salt was right there. I just had to stack it up a little higher. And the piece is called Job's Wife.
The salt. Ah, Job's wife turned to salt.
She turned to salt. And
Ah.
and Renee even tried to rent a giraffe from the San Francisco Zoo and tried because the pole was tall and they could lick the top. But as the cow would lick it, the blocks would slide down the pole anyway, so it didn't matter.
And that's really great. Were you in touch with Bruce Nauman at the time, who was living up in Davis, I think, and making, I'm not sure what his work was about at that time in the 60s.
Well, I think he was beginning to do, or about ready to do his tunnel, like the Green Corridor.
Yeah.
Because not long after that, I made some video pieces, Marmar March, Notes for the Revolution.
Oh, that's a great piece.
Which, in a way, Bruce kind of hinted at, why not have the audience be part of the piece when you walk through his corridors? And I took that literally and tried to make some pieces like Tokyo Rose is another one.
Yeah.
And Marmar March. And yeah, that led, and I also at Renee's met Dennis Oppenheim, because Dennis one time went, I think, to Stanford for a short time, and then moved to New York. But he built one or two pieces for Renee also, or made one or two pieces for Renee Theresa. And I became friends with him. So when I go to New York, he said, you should move out of California as soon as you can and buy a loft here. Look at the size of my studio. I own the one below also. And you could rent one and not pay rent and have two huge spaces. They were so cheap in the Soho at that time. I didn't do it, but they were cheap considering what they'd be now. And this was right near, I did have a gallery, Reese Paley, both on Maiden Lane here in San Francisco and in New York. And then I showed a short time with Leo Castelli in video. But when he decided he wasn't interested so much in video, he kept only Nauman and got rid of the rest of us pretty much and started Castelli Sonabend tapes and films. But I managed to show Tokyo Rose at Castelli in the gallery.
Oh, that's great.
And it went, of course, 420 West Broadway was where a lot of curators from Europe went because it had all those different galleries. And so it was in the Paris Biennale in 2 years.
Wow.
They built a new one. They didn't do the one that I had. Instead, San Francisco Museum of Art bought it, the Tokyo Rose. But the French built a new one. And at the end of the show, they offered it to me, but I didn't have any way to ship it. or store it. So they gave it to an aviary who then kept it for birds.
Oh, that's fascinating. That's
Yeah.
great. Yeah, you had an early career in New York. That it's interesting because California performance seems a little different than like New York. But there was one point where you had Vito Conchi teach in the summer, and all the kids got cars and took them apart and stacked them in a totem pole. That ring a bell? Well, performance wasn't just performance. It also became about site. You sort of made it more like site specific installation. It really sort of moved out into like public spaces and into non-traditional spaces. And then there was all these things coming up when you were there, like High Performance Magazine, New Langton Arts, all these
Right.
alternative galleries. You were there at the height of that. Terry
Yeah.
Fox was there with you.
Oh, he was incredible. Yeah.
Yeah.
One other piece that was, I built this piece called Guadalupe Bell, which is a huge bell. San Diego Museum or La Jolla Museum owns it. But I painted the wall green, very green, and then hand painted the Virgin of Guadalupe with phosphorescent paint, full scale. So she's full size on the wall, but you can't see her at all because the wall's the same color as the flat wall. And this big bell with a rope going into the gallery space. And if you don't ring the bell, that's it. But if you ring the bell, she appears on the wall for the length of time the bell rings, like gong, and then she's gone. Now,
Oh,
in
beautiful.
museums, you're never supposed to touch anything.
Okay.
So, and I wouldn't let the guards say, you can ring the bell, or there's no sign that says you can ring the bell. Only visitors who decided they would take a chance and ring it would see it. And I remember one couple, the woman rang the bell. The husband was standing here by where the Virgin of Guadalupe is. And he said, did you see her? And she didn't. She was looking at the bell and she never saw the Virgin of Guadalupe, but he did.
That's a fantastic piece. I haven't seen that one. That'd be nice to see that again. It'd be nice to see your work in a museum.
It's a hard piece to put up because they have to paint a whole wall. And the strobe light, I don't know. Now it's hard to find a strobe light because I made it so that the clapper of the bell is let's say, the clapper and the bell are separated by a plastic axle. I changed the axle inside the bell. So the clapper, the bell ringer is separate from the bell. And if it touches the bell, it sets off the strobe light. Oh. So when you ring it, it rings. Otherwise, it never rings. It's not active. You have to ring. Otherwise, it would always keep ringing if I didn't change the axle. It would just keep getting, I mean, not ringing, but the light would be strobing. And
that's pretty fantastic.
It takes a real curatorial commitment to put it up and keep it up because it's silly to do if it's just a week or two. It takes quite a bit of time to get all these little things to work right. But that's what it is.
Complicated. Well, you made other complicated things with the video of the chapel, the church in Paris, Chartres.
Oh, that piece, what happened was I received a grant. I can't remember. I think it might have been a Rockefeller or something, NEA or a Rockefeller grant. And so I decided I would like to build television's a window, but what's an important window? So I thought I'd go to France and look at the cathedrals. I was staying in an art historian's space at the time. He had He was the one that didn't get tenure with me at Santa Clara. We were both fired, but he was a great art historian, had these books on cathedral windows. I decided I'd go to France. Well, I went to France, but they had what I was looking for is a window whose proportions of each pane is the same size as a television set in those days. Not size, but scale. That is 3:4 proportion. Turned on its side vertically, had to be 3:4, not 16:9 like they are now. So I went to Notre Dame, I went to many cathedrals, but at Chartres I found the right one. And it was the perfect window. And well, first of all, I went to the Préfet, the Office of Architecture, Préfet des Arts and Art Métiers, and asked if I could build a scaffold in the cathedral. And they said, we don't know, we'll let you know in a week or two. And I went back to the place I was staying and told my landlord, the proprietaire, my story in my broken French. He said, MMO, he went to the phone. He said, let's go on the subway right now. We went on the subway to the head of Art and Métier, the Préfet des Arts et Métiers. He knew the head person, and the head architect phoned Chartres and said, let Paul Kos build a scaffold in front of the window of his choice, period. And so I went back. He used to do book binding, and he did this book binding. And when diplomats would go to Europe, they would need a gift, so he would do something like that. And so he knew all the heads up, like diplomats, etc. And that's how he knew the Préfet des Arts et Métiers. Anyway, when I got to Chartres, I told them which window I needed in front of this l'échafaudage, the scaffold, in front of the right window. And they decided he's an American. He doesn't know the best window. So they built it in a different window, which is squares instead of rectangles. Oh. And so when I got back 3 days later, after the weekend, I said, it's in front of the wrong window. I can't, this won't work. And they said, but can you move it? They said, oh, yes, maybe 2-3 weeks we can move it. I said, I can't wait. But I noticed at lunchtime, they were playing the game pétanque.
Oh, yeah.
Side. I went out and said, if I beat you in pétanque, these are the workers now, not the head. The workers, if I beat you in pétanque, will you move the scaffold after lunch? And if I lose, it's $10, 10 francs to $1. I'll pay you in US dollars. And they liked it because the dollar was so good then. So we played. I lost, but they were so impressed that I played their game. They moved it for me right after lunch, and I was able to do it.
Magic.
And
like
so,
magic.
Yeah. But then I took my video camera up. They wouldn't let me hook the scaffold to the cathedral. It's a historic building. Oh. So every time I'd move, the scaffold, which is 6 meters high, and way up in the air, would be just like a fishing pole. And I'd move. So finally I decided I have to take still images of each one of these windows. And I did it at different times of the day, but mostly I wanted the one where the window really was perfect. So I took 35 millimeter shots with my little Kodak Retina camera and brought them back to the US and borrowed, instead of a little dumb camera in my studio on Utah Street, I borrowed an $18,000 camera and was able to shoot through the slide with a 4x5 corrector so that I could do that, so they weren't trapezoids.
Oh, yeah.
Those bellows, I forget what they're called, but the slide would be at the end, and California sunlight comes up, I photograph it, and
oh, that's so smart.
12 minutes of running the f-stop from light to dark. So it goes from dawn to dusk with the video camera doing the 12 minutes by
Wow.
going from dark to light to noon to dusk again. And it worked. That was
That's pretty complicated. That's really complicated to figure out.
Yeah, but it finally worked. Well, I work for
Beautiful.
Notre Dame.
Yeah.
She helps me a lot. Guadalupe, Notre Dame.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Do you still have that piece?
John Hanhart at the Whitney came out and was going to show it. And when he heard I didn't do video live at the cathedral, decided not to. So I waited and waited, and finally it showed in Minneapolis at the Walker Arts Center. And they paid to have 27 television sets and everything.
Fantastic.
And rented it to San Francisco later and to the Whitney later.
Oh, that's great. It traveled.
And Rene didn't see it there. He saw it when I had a show at St. Louis University. They have a museum on the campus called the Museum of Religious Art. And they showed the piece Chart. And his mother Rene DeRosa's mother, happened to have a house on the campus, which she was going to donate to the university when she died. Well, he saw the piece there, bought it, moved it to Napa, and said, I'm going to build a chapel for it. And he built an underground chapel for it. And
Wow.
Isabel, my wife, Isabel, and I did the tunnel leading to it. Isabel had the idea, since it's an underground, and the tunnel should have timbers holding it up. So we did them in the Roman numerals, the Stations of the Cross.
Oh, wow.
So
Fantastic.
Stations. And then Isabel painted on the wall. It was flooding Napa Valley at that time. Painted on the wall Noah's Ark, 300 cubits by 50 by 30. And it doesn't look like Walt Disney would do it. It looks like exactly 50 cubits by 30 by 50.
Wow.
Like a kayak, which is very seaworthy. And that's it. And
fantastic.
Isabel
Is it still there?
Were married. Yes.
Oh.
And Isabel and I were married in the chapel, and Rene was my best man.
That's beautiful.
So,
I hope you have photos of the wedding.
He did. Perhaps. But he was an incredible collector of Bay Area artists. He'd even come to the Art Institute and walk down the studios, especially like when the new building was done, and he'd walk down the ramp and he'd go up to the painting studios and see somebody painting and say, give you $200 for that right now. And the student would say, it's still wet. He says, it's fine, here's $200. And sometimes the student would give it to him and he'd put it in his truck and drive to Napa. And sometimes he wouldn't, but he would do. Love walking around the school all the time.
You know, I went up there when
and
I was pretty young.
He picked up quite.
I went to that ranch when I was pretty young. There was a big party at the DeRosa Ranch that I went to, and I went inside the house, and it had like a pitch ceiling like a church, and art was hanging off of the ceiling, and Ursula Schneider had this plastic piece that she had made that was hanging there, and all the hallways were like knee deep of photographs stacked up everywhere. And maybe he built a new house since I was there, but it was just packed with art.
Well, it may have changed. Now it's changed, I'm sure, but William Wiley had Houdini on the ceiling. Did a painting of Houdini walking a tight wire, and it was up on the ceiling, so it looked like Houdini from below looking up.
It's a great, crazy house. It was really, he just loves art. And he had a lot of outside installation sculptures and little lakes with sculptures in them. That was like 1980, 81.